Hi, everyone. This will be the second program on the shadow government, which, as you know, the last program I differentiated. There's a difference between the shadow government and the deep state. I come from the belly of the beast, from the shadow government, from the CIA. And of course, the higher I got up in positions there, the more unconstitutional activity I saw. And of course, some was illegal. So we're going to go through part two of the shadow government today, and we'll go for about 20, 30 minutes so people have time to watch. And I'll make some comments as we go along. I hope this is eye-opening for everyone. I hope people understand after this that essentially we live in a post-constitutional government, and as long as we all know that and we're educated, we can start working to make a difference, especially through Congress and perhaps even the Supreme Court. So let's begin with our presentation here. Now, it's important to realize that we are supposed to be under a constitutional government. And as I mentioned before, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So if a federal agency violates the Constitution, they're committing a felony or multiple felonies. And that's important to remember. We talked last time about the difference between the shadow government and the deep state. The shadow government operates by secrecy, and the deep state operates by money. I went through all of the various agencies in the shadow government. Now, these are all the agencies that operate using the power of secrecy. And there are several of them. We talked about those before. The ones in white have recently been weaponized, starting way back with the CFR, have been weaponized against the sitting president of the United States. And the deep state, as I mentioned the last time, is comprised of the military-industrial complex or military-industrial congressional complex because of how Congress is manipulated through donations and lobbyists. The intelligence contractors, huge, huge part of the shadow government that's unreported and unelected. We'll talk about that later. Defense contractors, Wall Street, which essentially is now a offshoot of the Department of Treasury, sadly. We've got the military-industrial complex lobbyists, foreign lobbyists. Saudi Arabia might as well have a seat in Congress, and also Israel with the power that they wield on Capitol Hill. Excuse me. The Federal Reserve, as we all know, is not federal, nor does it have any reserves. It's composed in secrecy by secret foreign banks that set U.S. economic policy and control the U.S. economy. We'll do a whole separate podcast on that, but that is very, very serious. Our economy is controlled not by our federal government, but by foreign banks that operate in the Federal Reserve in secret. The central banks, of course, that are part of that, and the IMF, World Bank, connected to the Federal Reserve. And what we're seeing is a merge towards global influence of the U.S. economy in the march towards globalism on behalf of the elites, many in the shadow government and the deep state. So we went through that, and let's continue on. I want to make it clear that secrecy, specifically regarding the CIA and the intelligence communities, is supposed to be a foreign mission, and it's bound by regulations to only collect on foreign entities and not U.S. citizens. I will be doing a lecture on how the CIA spies on whistleblowers and silences them later. And by the way, we have a segment on patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp, where I get into the government spying on whistleblowers in detail, and Americans for that matter, which is a violation of U.S. law. And they're doing it. But within the United States, excuse me, there are 10,000 secret sites connected to the CIA and the NSA operating within the United States of America. 10,000 secret sites, most of which are not known or monitored by Congress. This is domestically within the United States. There's 1,271 large federal agencies involved in secrecy, with their headquarters located in the United States. There's 1,931 huge private federal contractors that operate and do much of the secret work for the CIA and the NSA located within the United States. And I'll show you how important that is in a moment. We know that there's 4,800,000 Americans that have a top secret clearance. That's what we know. Actually, the figure is higher than that. There are 854,000 Americans that have the highest clearances available that are located, employed in the United States. And of course, that includes supporting their families. And it's very difficult for them to break free of that. There are hundreds of thousands, from secretaries to CEOs, of people within the United States that are working for these shadow government entities, and their entire financial life depends on it. They are bound by a secrecy oath. Let's say, in this case, a CIA secrecy oath, which they sign, which tells them that if they reveal anything regarding the classified assignments that they're involved in, even if it's illegal activity, even if they're a whistleblower, they will face termination or criminal penalties, in other words, prison. So we wonder why whistleblowers are not coming out of these agencies. Well, this is why. It's a system of complete personal destruction, and I'll cover that. I'll cover that on Patreon /Kevin_Shipp in alarming detail. If a person within these agencies, in my case within the CIA, has enough evidence to expose the illegal activity of the CIA or the NSA, the executive branch and the CIA can automatically invoke what's called the state's secrets privilege, shut the case down, seal all the evidence, as they did in my case, so not even Congress can see it, and then threaten the employee with prison if he or she talks about the evidence to anyone. That's the power that the shadow government has, and that's why we don't see more whistleblowers coming out, because it's a system of complete personal destruction. And only a few, less than a handful, are willing to stand up against that. Now look at this, the matrix of influence under the Defense Authorization Act. The Congressional Armed Services Committee, John McCain used to be the chairman. He's been replaced. There are 48 senior members, congressmen and senators, that make up the Armed Services Committee, and they decide what sort of military support, defense support, CIA support is going to go to war, essentially. The war machine, bombs, missiles, and bullets. Now, I want you to look at this. This Lockheed Martin, the chief spying arm of the CIA and NSA, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Boeing, Booz Allen Hamilton, one of the largest ones, and that's where Edward Snowden came from. This represents $1 trillion in annual spending for defense-related purposes. That's a huge amount of money, huge. $46 billion in foreign arms sales. The United States government, our government, is the biggest arms dealer in the world. $46 billion in foreign arms sales, 150 this year, 150 million in arms going to Saudi Arabia, which teaches the most extreme form of Islam, Wahhabism, and its belief is the overturning of Western governments. And we're giving them 150 million just this year alone of aircraft, bombs and missiles, and state-of-the-art U.S. weaponry. Now, the average contribution to members of the Armed Services Committee by Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and these military-industrial contractors, complex contractors, is $700,000 a year. These companies contribute to members of the Congressional Armed Services Committee. They contribute to making sure that they stay as an incumbent. They contribute money into their PACs, their leadership PACs, for their election and re-election. $700,000 a year on the average goes to each member of the Armed Services Committee in Congress. As we know, John McCain, before he passed, made $694,508 a year from the military-industrial complex. No wonder Senator McCain loved war. No wonder Senator McCain was sneaking into Syria, sneaking into Ukraine, on every TV program he could get on, advocating for war in Syria, and on and on and on and on. Well, good old John gets almost $700,000 a year from the military-industrial complex for selling bullets, arms, and airplanes. So war is profitable for members of the Congressional Armed Services Committee. You think that the military-industrial complex has influence over the decisions of our Congress? You bet they do. Now, this is a massive corporate monopoly. And this is what I call the secret intelligence industrial complex. This is the complex that no one knows about. And the CIA, the NSA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA, and the NRO all employ these companies to do really most of their spying for them. Leidos Holding being a large one, CSRA, CACI, which managed the CIA torture program. We'll do a show on that later. It was not just waterboarding, that was a lie. SAIC, which was involved in the NSA domestic spying program, which was exposed by William Binney and Thomas Drake. And they messed up the Trailblazer program in the NSA, so much so that the federal government lost $7 billion SAIC lost in that bungled program, and yet they were not held accountable, and they're still working for the military-industrial complex. In this case, the secret intelligence industrial complex. No discipline, they're still a contractor. Booz Allen Hamilton, one of the biggest of all of them. Actually, the CIA used Booz Allen to structure and develop the intelligence agencies in the government of Egypt. They go back that far. Now, this has been increased. President Trump has increased this dramatically. I'll talk about that in a later show. But up until just a few months ago, this was $50 billion annually of your tax dollars. Did you vote on this? No. Did you get any alerts from your congressmen or senators on this? No, nothing. Done in secret. This is top secret, unreported work that the American people do not even know about. Do we have a constitutional crisis? Yes, we do. Also, there's no accountability. No accountability to Congress, no accountability to the American people whatsoever, and Congress doesn't even know the size and extent of this complex, which I will talk about later. So, the cost of the shadow government and deep state, this has gone up significantly when President Trump increased the budget to the intelligence agencies and the Defense Department. But look at this. Just before this happened, $50 billion of the total intelligence budget, that has gone up. There's $598 billion, the total defense budget, that has gone up. $150 billion is the cost of overseas military bases. $5.9 billion in military aid to foreign countries. $4 billion to congressional lobbyists, completely aside from any input by the American people, and many times Congress is bought and paid for. I'll do a show on Congress. The elections are over, and I'm going to discuss that Congress itself needs reform badly. This is $803 billion. These are your tax dollars. Now, did you vote on your taxes going to this? No. Did you know your taxes went to this? No. And here's the most outrageous part. This is the cost to Americans' vital security. The cost to all of us as Americans with our healthcare security and all the things, retirement security that really matter to Americans. Social Security. Congress has stolen the money that people have put into Social Security for their entire working life. Congress has stolen it, and now they're saying, well, Social Security may not be around. I'll tell you where they can take the money for Social Security and bring it back into the black, which they should, since it has been stolen. They can take it from the total intelligence agency budget, perhaps. How about military aid to foreign countries? $5.9 billion. Maybe they can replace the money they stole from Social Security from that. Medicare. Money's been stolen from Medicare, and now Congress and the Senate is saying Medicare is too expensive. We're going to have to do away with it. We can't afford it. Well, let's go back to the $4 billion in congressional lobbyists, $5.9 billion in military aid to foreign countries, $50 billion our total intelligence agency budget, including illegally spying on Americans. I think perhaps they can take the money from that, excessive spending and sometimes illegal activities, and they can redo Medicare, because that is Americans' true security. This is an outrage. Medicaid, they're saying we've got to defund Medicaid. We can no longer afford it. Once again, look at the cost the budget for the shadow government and the deep state. The government has plenty of money, not just to save these programs, but to actually cause them to grow and expand. But they're not doing it. Healthcare. It took decades for any healthcare to be voted on by the Congress. Shame on them, including the Republicans. Shame on them. While people suffer, they go bankrupt in the VA, they die, and Congress and the Republicans and the Democrats did nothing about it. It took decades. And now, after Obamacare, which was a disaster, the Republicans, the rhinos, we'll deal with the rhinos later, are now proposing a new healthcare program, but they are prohibiting it from covering pre-existing conditions. Over half of us have some pre-existing conditions, most of which are pretty serious, most of which are expensive to be treated, and most of which are expensive for medications. And Congress wants no pre-existing conditions in the proposed healthcare program because they can't afford it. Go back up to the shadow government deep state budget for all these agencies and foreign aid. They can take it from there. People, we need to be outraged about this. We need to raise our voices about this. We need to pound on our congressmen and senators so we get it through some of their thick heads that we, the American people, are not going to put up with this any longer. This is an outrage. People are dying. They're going bankrupt while our government arms Saudi Arabia. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Oh, poor infrastructure. We're going to have to come up with new money. No, you don't. You take it from the shadow government deep state budget. The economy, unemployment, now that's gone up under the current administration. Poverty is going down. Americans are still suffering, and we have the money to correct that. The government has billions, actually more than trillions of money that they can spend to save these programs, but they're not doing it. So that's our show for today. And what we're going to do is, excuse me, I'm going to keep going with these segments, keep them short enough so that you all can view them and you can share them with your friends and family. And so we'll go for about a half an hour each. We've got a lot to cover regarding the shadow government and the deep state. So appreciate you watching, and let's get ready for the next segment. Thank you.